All right. All the kids are put to bed. It is midnight, so I should not speak as loud as I'm speaking right now.
Hey,
Jesus, it's about to be midnight, but we're
grab your
just
popcorn, everybody.
just gonna fucking keep going. We're gonna talk about Worm again.
Hey,
Arc 21.
boy,
Boy,
worm
this
can drink now.
yeah, Worm is old. If every arc was a year, Bradley, I'm so close. I feel like 23 is gonna be like I don't know why, but like I feel like when I get to 23, I'll be like, oh my god, only seven left.
I like how like you'll have like an arc, like you kind of set like the finish lines for yourself or like checkpoints where it's
Yeah,
like, oh, like this arc will be the arc, and then you get there and you're like, yes, and then it's like, okay, now this one is the one.
it was it's for me it's like 20, 23, and 26. When I get to 26, I'll be like, oh, I'm just gonna finish Worm like that weekend. I'm just gonna.
26 is my like, oh, here we fucking go.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. All right,
I mean, if you're asking me,
21 was really good, but I don't know if I have much to say. I have a lot to say about the climax.
we'll just talk about the ones we really like.
I mean, that's what we always do, of
Yeah,
course. Um, this arc was a lot of recuperating from Taylor's identity being outed. It has a lot of her being her queen pin self. She's very brutal this arc. She puts maggots in a man's eye. Like, what more do I need to say?
yeah, and the first time I read this arc, this was actually a very weird arc for me. Um, the first time I read it, and I didn't understand what the point of arc 21 was supposed to be until I read like the very last line of it. Um, 21.1 and like the last Taylor point of view, or no, not 21.1, 21.2 and like the last Taylor point of view chapter of this arc kind of make a sandwich that makes the arc make sense for me. Where,
Could you explain it?
yeah, most of the chapters of this arc are her going to do like different battles or seeing different people. Um, and I didn't know why at first. And in 21.2, she mentions that she finally looks at these notes from Dinah, and one of them is to cut ties. And she's like,
Right.
I think I finally know what I like this meant. I think I know what she wanted me to do. And then we see at the end of the arc, she turns herself in. Um, and so what this arc was, um, is like I noticed that you have a chapter where she's going to go check on Regent and Imp. She's like seeing like, okay, how are they operating?
On the
And
field.
yeah, she thinks about what they're going to be like in the future. And then she has a chapter where she goes to see Gru, and then she has a chapter where she goes to see Tattletale.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
when you
think,
put it that way, it was her cutting ties with all the
yeah,
undersiders one
I
by
think she
one.
just wanted to like, I don't know if like make sure they're going to be okay after she's gone is the right phrasing, because I don't know how okay these people can be, but I think she really wanted to kind of get one last look at all these people. And like the first time I read this arc, I was like, this is weird because like each chapter is a different, like a totally different thing. And whenever I got the I surrender, I was like, oh, that was her saying goodbye.
Yeah, it was definitely jarring, like you said. Every single chapter was like in a different time and like a different area. Speaking of her, I said a little bit about it last episode, but I'm glad that she addresses like how kind of fucked up and weird Imp and Regent are. It's something like Wild Bill holds a lot of things to the close to the chest, where it's like things that should have come up by now just haven't because they will be more important later in the story. That was definitely one of them. That
Yeah.
being said, now that she's not in the Undersiders, I wonder when we'll get to like. I'm getting this weird feeling that I'm gonna feel like Imp and Regent are underused throughout this story. I feel like the clock is ticking down on them, but I mean, there's gonna be a big climax, I'm sure. So we'll see. Um,
Um, I just like that whenever Taylor gets to go look at them, she kind of has a reason for checking out all of her different teammates. And for Regent and Imp, I think she's worried about what they could become because of their powers.
yeah,
She's like, it would be very easy for Regent to become another Heartbreaker, and it would be very easy for Imp to just be like,
assassin.
yeah,
She
like the
said.
world's greatest assassin.
and yeah, it's she's worried about their future, and it's interesting. They're the only group that she saw together.
Yeah,
Um,
those two are pears in a pod. Is that
sh
no peas in a pod? I'm an idiot.
yes and no. She also interestingly cuts ties with Miss Militia, Flechette, and Parian in a way. She goes talk to them. She has this line where she says like no one's cooperating with like no one in the city can cooperate. When I think Miss Militia and Dragon and Arms Master have been really good at reciprocating like a good amount of leniency towards Taylor, and she's just not taking it. So
Yeah,
it's really rough because a lot of the time I'm also partway through 22. I just don't really agree with Taylor a lot of the time. Sometimes she has good points here and there, but like I feel like she's been so thick-headed about this whole situation that it's just I'm not gonna berate her because I mean that's just who she is, and like this story is interesting because she's this way. But it is sad just to
yeah.
see it happen.
There's a paragraph I highlighted because I think Tattletale's going to agree with you. Um, Tattletale throughout a lot of the story, I think because of how she views Taylor, she usually takes Taylor's side on things. But Tattletale really calls Taylor out, and basically what happens in 21.2, Taylor kind of expresses her frustration where she's talking about Arms Master and Miss Militia and all of them. And she's like, why is it so hard for me to find someone who's willing to cooperate with me and who's on the same page as me? They won't compromise with me. She's like, why can't they just see things the way I am? And Tattletale says, they are probably all looking at you and wondering why you can't see things the way they do.
Yeah,
And so Taylor, she's like, no, 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 it's not like that. She's like, I'm just talking about simple things like keeping the peace and getting the fundamentals right. And Tattletale's like, so are they. And that's the deal is I think that's a big part of what Taylor's going through right now at this part of the story, 21, and especially I think in the early parts of 22, where she really wants these compromises. And I think Tattletale being able to call Taylor out on it is kind of Wildbow and the characters saying like we're conscious of this quality of Taylor.
yeah, for sure. And it's Worm's such an interesting story, and it's just upsetting to see some of it happen. Even though it's all really good, it's like, man, why can't you just all fucking get along? Um, so Taylor also says something about like there being no karmic retribution in all of this. Like it's the world's so unfair. There's no karma. Eh, But Taylor, all these things that happen to you are karma. They're part like just because these kinds of things aren't happening to your opponents doesn't mean like you're getting your piece. Like this is happening because of the crimes you've committed. Like that's why you've lost your relationship with your dad and your life as Taylor. So it's like she doesn't always deflect like the blame that she has in all this, but sometimes she still does. You know, like back in the day, she would never really feel guilt, but now she kind of goes back and forth from feeling guilt and then blaming everything else.
Yeah, I think one moment she has of that is in 21.1 where she's talking about how she feels about the situation with her dad right now because obviously she can't really go back to him. And at first she's like, oh, this whole thing with like my dad is probably the most heartbroken he's been since my mom died. And she puts part of the blame, she's like, it's because Dragon and Defiant outed me. But then in that same paragraph she's like, and I guess the blame is on me too, because I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're kind of right to
I
blame yourself
I
because
guess
you
it is.
you put yourself on this path.
Yeah, and again, this really goes back. We'll talk about it more in 22. More stuff happens there. Um, what else was really worth mentioning here? I really like how like Miss Militia is willing to see Miss Militia is willing to bend the rules to work with Taylor here. So it's like she's saying no one will compromise with her, but like They're freaking trying, man. These are. She also doesn't understand how trying these times are for the PRT. Like they're having to scramble and put this shit together, and she's just being so selfish about it, and just blaming it on them being selfish about it. It's ugh.
Yeah, it's like to Taylor, I think compromise means do what I say. And I usually whenever I see Taylor be uncompromising like this, um I haven't really seen this thought in like other places or discussions. I don't know how much stock there is in it. This is just kind of my personal theory that I wonder how much of this behavior like developed as a result of her having her power, where
Hmm.
she is constantly always in charge of and making the calls for like hundreds of thousands of things, and a lot of times it actually usually goes pretty well for her. And we know there are instances of people kind of having the way of thinking altered by powers, and I don't know if there's any confirmation for it. It's my pet theory that maybe before she had her powers, Taylor could have been a more compromising person.
She was definitely completely different personality wise.
Yeah.
I'm gonna adopt that as my own headcanon because I feel like it really helps explain her pretty human. Like it's very human of her to be as inconsistent as she is, but I think this is also a good contributing factor to
Yeah.
it. Um, so in 21.6, there's some action. Um, there's this part where like the news broadcaster, like there's a broadcast on TV and she's listening to it and she can't tell if it's cartoon or the news. And it was just a fun beat of like reality is so funky right now that the actual news sound like straight up cartoons.
Yeah, that is pretty fun.
Um, there's a character introduced with hydrokinesis. I just wanted to bring that up because that's my
Is
favorite power.
water
Legia.
power cool?
I love him. Well, how did Butcher die? I was so confused, and I was just like, I'll just have Bradley explain it to me.
Okay, so this is the big one right here. This is the big one.
Shit happens, bitch. Part 5.
This is what I affectionately refer to as Chekhov's cherish.
Yes.
Essentially, they lured Butcher to the beach within range of Cherish. And basically, if I recall correctly, Cherish has basically been Bonesaw kind of tuned her power to be like exclusively receiving negative emotions from Brockton Bay.
Uh-huh.
And basically they got Butcher to go into like an aura of suicide around Cherish. And so I think the implication here is that Cherish makes Butcher commit suicide, and then obviously, like, if one of the Undersiders or one of Accord's people had killed Butcher, they would become the new Butcher, and
Right.
that's a super good solution. So, since Cherish was technically responsible for Butcher's death, now Cherish has 14 Butcher voices to keep her company down there.
Is this now Chekhov's Butcher 15?
Chekhov's Butcher 15.
Oh no.
That Tattletale's like, oh well, maybe Leviathan will swim by and kill himself.
um that's so interesting. So if anyone hold on. So if anyone walked into that beach, they would kill themselves?
I think that's the implication.
No, that
No,
no.
no,
That's
that's a
ridiculous.
horror. That would never happen.
What the fuck? There's a beach where you commit suicide now in Brockton Bay, and this hasn't come up.
Yeah, it's like Morio. They have fun little. Morio has fun little attractions. The beach.
Yo, Angelo. Wow, I'm gonna have to ruminate on that a little bit. I totally get how like if that's how that worked, I get how Butcher 15 would now become Cherish. So that's cool. Well, all right. After this, like, there's a really tender moment of Taylor going home with Bitch,
Oh my god.
and like Bitch's home just seems to be like a home for broken people. or that's her whole territory. Like everyone that's working for her, and bitch has her own little girlfriend now.
Yeah,
And I thought like, God, bitch's character development is just so like it's at such a nice point right now where she's, I mean, we'll talk about it later. She's handling Taylor leaving really well, relatively speaking, for someone whose biggest fear is being betrayed. Um, she's open enough to show Taylor like this tender side of her. Very interesting and like totally well developed.
yeah. It's like Taylor wants to cook dinner, and Rachel's like, "I really wish you would make that green shit you made that one time," which like coming from Rachel is like a really sweet thing. And like I've said it before, Rachel's my favorite character in the whole story, and I just love this whole section because like I think back to the Brutus interlude where it's from her dog's perspective, and she had her dog bite a small child. And then we look at this interlude where before, bitch didn't want anybody in her territory. She didn't even want henchmen. Now she has these people living with her. Granted, she's still a little emotionally removed from them to a degree, but there's a kid living here, and Taylor's really understandably worried for a second. And Rachel said, like, I made sure to like choose dogs that aren't gonna, hurt anybody to live here. And even Taylor's like, a long time ago, she wouldn't have even thought about that. And it and I think the last like really big like I think development for bitch we had that I liked was whenever she kind of was in the same room as Dinah, and
Yeah,
Taylor was kind of like, if you want these dogs to eventually be happy with people, they need to be able to socialize and be around people. And now we see it wasn't really a one-time thing. Rachel's kind of taken that back to her territory. She's trying to socialize her dogs, and she's socializing her dogs so they can be around people better. And at the same time, Rachel is socializing herself with people, and she's able to be more gentle with them now. And I
it's
just love her so much.
fantastic and wholesome. And Rachel is top two Undersiders, maybe top one. Depends.
I love her.
Depends how I'm feeling. Um, finally, this discussion goes pretty well in order because we get the finale, which is kind of Taylor saying goodbye to Tattletale. Definitely her best friend in the group.
Yeah,
Really tender moment of her thanking Lisa, but then Lisa being like, "I don't know if what I got you into was for the better."
yeah. Because like I think Tattletale was very kind to Taylor in her way, but I think we know that like Lisa clearly does care about Taylor, but in her own way, what she was doing for her might have been for herself.
Yeah, I mean, she pretty much said that uh, like I think it was like an arc or two ago in the last chapter where she talks about how saving Taylor was making up for the void that she couldn't save her brother, kind of
Yeah,
thing. Lisa really annoys me, but man, she was really cool here. Maybe Lisa not so bad.
maybe Lisa not so bad.
Maybe Worm good. Um,
Maybe.
so there was a interlude here with Parian.
Hey.
At first, I didn't like this interlude because I was like, I don't really care about Parian and Flechette or any of that right now.
Yeah, they're kind of background.
It's like I don't. I'm not super into the Fault Line storyline either. Those would be the two weak points that we keep touching up on. I turned around on that Parian interlude when I realized what it really was an interlude that let us see the Undersiders' reactions to Taylor leaving, while in the same interlude you get to wrap in like Parian story progression. So
Yeah.
that was a really good call on Wild Bill's part. Um, God, those reactions were rough, man. But I'd like to see. Also, I didn't talk about it, but the scene where Taylor turns herself in, I was like, oh my god, what the fuck is she doing now? I thought she was gonna do another terrorist attack. Like
Yeah,
the
it was funny because on Discord, I think all you said was "it's happening," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you just read."
I dude, this got me hyped when I read the end of because I talked last week. It's like I can't wait till Taylor's in the PRT or the wards or wherever she ends up.
And then
Um,
lo and behold,
lo and behold, she turns herself in. This shit's crazy. Um, I hope the Undersiders don't do any stupid shit.
hmm,
Uh,
they would
I'm
never do that.
I'm not in 20, I'm not that far into 22 has a lot of like you have until 8 p.m. or the Undersiders are gonna do some shit. I'm like, please don't. Oh, um, so the interlude with Number Man.
Ooh,
So many good parts of it. We're talking about it a little bit. Partially like how he just manhandles the escaped prisoner, and that ending of that fight where he's like, "Could I have beaten you?" And he's like, "Yeah, maybe if you're in better shape or if you fought a little bit better. Could I have escaped? No, there's no
he's like,
escape."
"There's never a chance you could escape," and like this prison is made more terrifying by the fact that these people's cells don't have bars or glass walls. They
Yeah,
technically could step out, but he's like, they never try that more than once.
it's like the in Dark Knight Rises, the prison Batman gets thrown into. You can just escape if you want to try dying.
If you want to try,
You can come into the Skypiea. It's totally cool, man.
yeah, we're just gonna kill you.
So Number Man just is really interesting. I really like how he views power as power as money. He knows that he's bland, but he kind of made himself that bland. He like very specifically took on this image of being the Number Man.
Yeah,
Uh, his power is just math, but using math to see the future or something like it's very interesting. I don't think it was very explicitly explained. We just got
yeah.
a
I
lot
think
of
like, to
examples
some
of it being.
degree, it's like not only can he see like probabilities of attacks someone might do, but for like each of those attacks, he can see like the exact like speed and trajectory they would
Yeah,
take.
a little bit of an epitaph going on.
Yeah,
Um, Something super insane about this is that the doorman is a prisoner in this prison. That melted my mind because the doorman's like the most important person in Cauldron in my eyes. This
yeah.
organization could not exist without this man.
It's like these two. It's like the two key like people to their entire organization is the number man or not the number man. Well, I mean he's pretty.
The doctor, the number man, and the doorman, in
Yeah,
my eyes, those are
doorman
the big
make
heads.
these doors, and then they have another person who can like see everything everywhere at all times,
Right.
and you can like touch him to also get that sight.
Weird shit. Um, did they casually confirm intergalactic entities or groups of people in this chapter, or did I misread that?
I think to a degree, yeah, because they have like doorman making portals.
No, I swear they said the word intergalactic like groups or some shit. I need to go reread it at some point.
Yeah, I'd have
Uh,
to check that.
uh what else I got about the number man? He's working with the janitor, which is interesting. Um, at the end, the doctor's like, "All right, you got to go on the field because we need Contessa handling bigger deals like destroying Fault Line's crew." Um, and he's like, "Oh, I haven't gone into battle in a long time." And we get this flashback of him and Jack being in the Slaughterhouse Nine together
They were best friends.
back when Jack was. It's so weird. This came out of fucking nowhere. Like, is this not like super shock to the system? Um,
I was like, I was very shocked because like it's weird to think that Jack wasn't always the leader of the Slaughterhouse Nine, but it's
yeah,
even weirder to think of like little chibi Jack.
Chibi. That's not what I pictured.
Chibi.
They were killing people in this interlude,
Well,
so
yeah, but you know,
chibi killing. Um, it was just interesting because it's like so at the end, like offhandedly, they say that Jack killed King, and
yeah,
how King called him Harbinger because first of all, that's a good name. Uh,
yeah.
little did he know.
cool.
or maybe he knew all along. But it just felt out of nowhere because like I felt like there was no build up to it. It's like this is the first time we meet the Number Man. By the way, I was also in the nine and I was BFFs with Jack. Um, we'll see where that goes. But this, have you ever heard the audiobook for this chapter?
I don't think so.
It ends with like it's the only chapter so far that ends with like the worm like music score that they use for the audiobook.
Huh.
They interlace it with the dialogue at the end.
Oh.
I thought that was interesting because the dialogue at the end is the first like hard thematic confirmation that the agents, which are what the passengers are interfacing with, I believe that's what I was to take from this. Um,
Yeah.
that
I
the
think you said like this is the first time that they consider in the story like maybe passenger not so good.
maybe passenger exclusively bad,
Yeah.
which
I think like
I've thought this for a long time, right? Because we've talked a lot about how powers, everyone that has powers has an aggressive power. In this arc, Taylor talks about how every power is doomed to fail in some way. So she's like, even Accord's plan is probably gonna explode in his face. We've talked about how violent capes are by design, stuff like that, Manton effects and stuff like that. So it's always seemed like the agents want the humans to be fighting for some reason, but it's kind of like it's a lot of thematic points that have built up to that conclusion. But this is the first arc where, like, narratively, someone is voicing that what I believe to be a reality that these
yeah.
passengers are very malicious in intent.
Yeah, I think his way of speculating on it was like, is it possible that Jack is super in sync with his agent? And he's like, if that is the case, he's like, if the agents are in sync with Jack, that means they are probably their motives are probably not very good.
Yeah, and that's when the music started playing. So I was like, this seems like the biggest bomb drop so far then if they're like if the audiobook is doing this. So that got my mind racing. Um so they say Jack's power, did they say it's a thinker here or was that the spoiler from last week? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
so like someone did comment on one of our videos that there's a thinker aspect to Jack, but fortunately Willer was about to get to this chapter where Numberman kind of speculates the same thing.
Yeah, so it's not so bad, I guess. I just can't see how Jack's power is anything but like a. I don't know all the classifications, but I'm gonna guess that he is using his agent as like a blade from a distance. Like it's like an invisible being behind him, like a stando that's slashing. But if
One day
that's
I'll get my day in the sun to like
yeah, I get to finally read your crazy post that got a bunch of comments.
you don't get to read that one yet.
Well, one day, surely.
Yeah, one day.
What?
Um, Jack's power is like one of my absolute favorite examples of a power being representative of the trigger event. So later in the story, I'll
Man,
get the
just give me a number. I need to know.
later in the story, I'll get to,
Fucking come on, man. I gotta know.
I'll get to have my speech.
Oh, anyway, but if my stand idea is correct, I don't see why wielding certain different types of knives would have an effect. So that probably isn't it, unless it's dumb. But that would never happen.
Oh,
Um. Anyways, I hope the Number Man. They said he wasn't fighting the Nine. Also, the Nine aren't in this galaxy anymore. Spoiler alert.
oh yeah,
Lit-
they yeeted themselves out of here.
Literally removing themselves until the end game, so that no one can like kill them before. Oh, Jesus. Anyways, that's arc 21 on my end.
Yeah. Is this the longest roundabout cast ever?
We started at 8:10 and it's 10:20 or it's 12:20.
420.
No, well that would be 4:10. So if you want to talk about like I don't know, Hunter for 10 minutes, we can get there, but nah.
I totally could.
No, you're not. I refuse to allow it.
I was hungry like 4 hours ago.
Jesus. Well, you
So
don't have work tomorrow, so it's all good.
yeah, we'll be good.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great night.
Goodbye.
Stay warm.